Hello and welcome to the Stockyard Industrial Lead. I'm Eric Miller, and today we're going to be talking more about open spaces on the layout, and in particular we're going to be talking about what are called scenery only zones. So those spaces that you have in between towns, in between your customers, your industries, basically just areas that don't have a whole lot going on for the railroad, but are nonetheless important for a layout. So I'm going to show you some examples on my model railroad layout here and talk about why I feel they're important. So the best way to show you the scenery only zones of my layout is to look at a map of my layout, or basically a track plan. Now, admittedly, this is a little bit old. This is almost 2 years old. Not a whole lot has changed, but there are some important things. I tried to note some new stuff that I've added in here. The biggest probably is I used to have a huge open area at the end of the layout, which now has a customer, and a very small part is a scenery only zone. I feel that it's important to kind of incorporate scenery only zones in the middle of the layout. And I'd like to provide the source for my inspiration for scenery only zones is the How to Design a Small Switching Layout by Lance Minheim book, which has a chapter devoted to this concept. And in it, Lance Minheim suggests devoting up to a third of your layout to open space or scenery only zones. So this is a little bit different from the video that I did previously, where I talked about the abandoned spurs as being part of kind of an open space concept for your layout, and having more spaces where you just don't really have any activity to kind of spread it out and make it more realistic. The scenery only zones then is focusing actually on scenery. So you're thinking like, okay, landscaping, maybe some like a suburban development, housing, stuff like that. But basically just a place where only the main line track is going through it and you don't have anything else going on really. So in my layout, what I set it up is I had this town, Bellevue here, and South Omaha here, and the yard there. And so I decided that what I wanted to do is to create this open space here in the middle to kind of spread it out and make it look like you're going somewhere, as you want to do it with most model railroad layouts, I think. And even though this is a small switching layout, I still wanted that kind of open space in the middle, especially after reading Lance Minheim's book. So the other great thing about scenery only zones is you really get a feel for the geography and where your layout is at. And so if you're looking at your traditional industrial area where you have a some kind of switching customer, you might not be able to tell, like, are you in LA, are you in Chicago, St. Louis, whatever. You have a building and track that could be almost anywhere. Well, the scenery only zone really gives you that chance to show you where you're at. And so for me, I wanted to show that I'm in the Omaha area, specifically Bellevue. And for me, what I was able to do is have right here where the siding is have Gemini Park, which there actually is a real Gemini Park in Bellevue, and have that kind of look like Bellevue. And so having some of the like the landscaping look like it, some of the housing development, and also with the housing, then you get into kind of showing what area you're in. So that's kind of cool. You kind of bring it home really. So for my layout, basically this entire area here is what I would consider a scenery only zone. And that separates, like I said, Bellevue and South Omaha. I have another small scenery only zone here at Papio Creek, where you're coming into that last customer there that I recently added. This is all like very urban industrial. This is kind of a suburban industrial park. This is more old school or old style urban industrial zones, and then you got the yard over there. So not a whole lot of scenery going on in those areas. Most of it is concentrated right here. And so it's kind of a break away from the activity of the railroad, and as I said, a way to spread out the area, make it feel like you're going somewhere, make it feel like the layout is really bigger than it is, because again, with model railroads, what we're doing a lot is compressing the scene into a little bit smaller area, right? And so having this scenery only zone helps bring it apart. So that's how I have it set up on my layout, and that's how I designed it when I kind of replanned the layout a few years ago and committed myself to doing more of a small switching layout as opposed to the larger layout that I had before. So with that, I'm going to show you actually the specific examples, and kind of take a look at them and show you some of the main distinguishing features of these scenery only zones. So the first zone that we'll talk about is the major zone that I have in between Bellevue and South Omaha, which is this Gemini Park area and residential neighborhood. And so I tried to pattern it as closely as I could to Bellevue, which is is a suburb of Omaha, but it was actually the oldest city in Nebraska. It was first founded by fur traders back in the 1800s, and it had a big residential building boom during and after World War II because of the Martin Bomber Plant and then the Strategic Air Command that was located there. And the Air Force is definitely a big part of Bellevue's history. So I kind of wanted to bring that all together. I have a mixture of housing stock. I have some pre-World War II housing here with these bungalows, and then I have a post-World War II house there, because I wanted to show a little bit of both, because Bellevue is both pre and post World War II. That's where most of its residential development when it came from. So I wanted to show that. So again, we get into the geography and also, kind of show some of the history and background of where you're located at. So I think that's kind of cool. And again, I stress that I think it's important to try to go with very common, typical things that you would normally see. You don't want to do something crazy like, oh, let's have a funny looking circus, or have a spot where the aliens landed or something like that, because it kind of takes away from what you're really trying to present. I think just having the basic stuff makes it look more realistic. That's just my thoughts, my 2 cents. And so what I really like about this open space area too is the ability that I have to have a better grade crossing scene here, which I've mentioned before. I'm planning to develop a little bit more. It's just got the lights in it now, and I want to have sound and flashers there at some point. But it's a really good spot because the train just crawls through here, and there's nothing else really going on. So let's move down to the park and the siding. So this is called Gemini Siding, and the reason I named it Gemini Siding is after Gemini Park, which I mentioned is a park in Bellevue, and it's really close to where the Air Force Base is. So it's a little off. It's not prototypical here, but I really wanted to include Gemini Park. And the cool thing that I wanted to incorporate was this Gemini boilerplate capsule that was used during the Gemini space program. And the real Gemini Park had one of these. It's no longer there, but when I was a kid, it had that. And so I wanted to include that. And again, it kind of shows this, I wanted to show this being kind of an Air Force town and the development that came after World War II. So that's my intention. And with the landscaping that I chose, the trees, the greenery, this is kind of late summer era, so it's going to be really green, very humid in this part of Nebraska, and so not dry at all. So I wanted to definitely show that, again, representing the geography. So this is my main open space area, and that's it's one of the first areas that I've scenicked. And part of the reason is because it's one of the first areas you see when you come down in the layout, but I also feel that it's important in connecting the layout and just showing that distance in the layout. And next up, I will show you the other open space zone that I have. So the Papio Creek is really the only other open space scenery only zone that I have on the layout. Obviously, I have some like little spaces here and there where I don't have much going on, or I have the abandoned industries that I've mentioned before. But this is really a dedicated scenery only zone. And so this is a big creek here. This is Papio Creek and the bridge, which I recently found a real picture of the Rock Island Bridge that actually existed over this creek. It is nothing like this, unfortunately, but I had no idea what it looked like before I saw that photo just a few weeks ago. But nonetheless, this I really like this scene. I wanted to incorporate the bike path here for people getting some recreation, and I really tried hard to make the grass look like it really does there in that part of Nebraska. And as I've mentioned before, I just need to add some trees and more vegetation to really bring home that like humid, wet environment that is in this part of Nebraska. So, but again, it kind of stretches it out a little bit, and then you've got the last industry at the end, which is kind of cool. And then finally, last but not least, is the farm scene that I'm still working on. And this will also show that, hey, you're getting out into the rural part of the state. And so, again, it kind of shows you where you're going. It shows the geography. It ties all that into the railroad. So I find that's all very important to incorporate into your scenery-only zones. Again, you don't want to go crazy and go with something that is, not realistic or doesn't match your locale and your era. So you really want to tie this together. So when people come look at your layout, they'll kind of immediately, or maybe not immediately, but after a while taking it in, they'll say, oh yeah, this kind of does look like, you know, early 90s Nebraska or whatever you're trying to show. So I find that's important to kind of, so that way your guests, visitors that are operating the layout kind of have a general feel for this for where your layout is located at. So those are my main two zones. Again, as I've mentioned before, I find that it's important to incorporate some areas of no activity within even your active areas, because again, you know, even though we compress our layouts, we don't have a ton, you know, as you look at railroads, especially kind of modern post 1980s Staggers Act deregulation era, railroads don't have a ton of activity concentrated everywhere. So I find that it's important to kind of sprinkle a little bit of open areas, even in our industrial areas, which are heavy in railroad activity. But it's really good to break it up even more with these scenery only zones, where you have about a third of your layout, or at least a fourth of it, committed to just kind of an open space where you only have your mainline track running through it. So I hope these help show you some good examples of this, and what it's like, and maybe get some useful ideas. Maybe you're already incorporating this in your layout. So but yeah, these are basically my two examples. Thanks for watching this video. This is basically all I've got to show you today. And so I just really wanted to go through the importance of this, and it's helpful, I think, even in not only in planning a layout, but even as you're working and building on it, stuff to keep in mind. And I'd be interested to hear your comments on this idea, if you how you're incorporating your scenery only zones or open space in your layout. And also, if you have any questions or comments, as always, feel free to drop them by. So thanks for watching the video, and I will catch you next week on the Stockyard Industrial Lead.